It's something that we do much better than men. That it will not be as bad as you think it's going to be. And if you're aware of this, you at least stand a chance of being able to correct it. So let's have a Well, hello, and welcome to Happy Stuff and Fluff. My name's Christine L. Conroy, and this is a channel for women who are getting happy, living longer, and growing younger. So if any of those things appeal to you, you're in the right place. So yes, that thing that you're worried about is what I want to talk about today. How do I know you're worried about something? Because as women, we're always worried about something. At least most of us are. It's something that we do much better than men, incidentally. We worry too much, far too much. And that's what I want to talk about today. I especially want to talk about that particular thing that you're worried about. And I want to tell you that it will not be as bad as you think it's going to be. And what's more, you will be able to handle it. This is so good, I'm going to say it twice. That thing that you're worried about, get it in mind. It will not be as bad as you think it's going to be. And you will be able to handle it. How do I know that? How do you know that, Christine? Well, let me tell you something. It's a well-known fact, something that we are aware of in the psychology world, that human beings are notoriously bad at predicting the future. We vastly overestimate the likelihood of problems and their impact and consequences. As if that weren't enough, we vastly underestimate our ability to deal with them. Now, as I say, this is an actual fact. So if you take nothing else from this video, in fact, if you stopped watching right now, keep this in mind. Human beings vastly overestimate the likelihood of problems and also their consequences and impact. And we underestimate our ability to deal with things. Now, if that thing you're worried about, or the next time you are worried about it, you remember what I've just said, hopefully it will ease your mind a little bit and relax you a little bit more to enable you to think about this thing you're worried about a little bit more objectively. Stick with me and let me explain to you why we do what we do and what you can do about it. So we overestimate future problems for quite a few. There are quite a few psychological factors and biases involved, as well as external influences that I just want to talk through. Let's have a look at what we mean. So the first one is the negativity bias. Now, what you don't know is I've filmed this 3 times and have been unable to say that word, and I've just said it perfectly. Negativity bias. I'll tag it on at the end if I remember. So you will have heard of this. So it's kind of an ancient survival mechanism that helped us to identify potential threats and danger, which of course it still does. But as a result, we tend to pay more attention to potential problems than anything positive, let's say, and risks and so on. But this often leads to this overestimation of something likely to happen and its impact. So that's the first thing, negativity bias. Then we do something called, well, it's like a mental shortcut. Its actual name is availability heuristic bias. Quite a mouthful. But as I say, it's just really a mental shortcut we do that refers to the way we rely on information that's easily available in our memories. So let me give you an example of that. Let's say you watched a film, an action film, say, where there was like a multi-car pile-up, you know, the ones where there's cars spinning over like this when they've crashed. So you watch the film, it's a good film, forget about the film. The next day you're meant to meet your daughter for lunch, and she's late. Now, you are more likely to worry or start to worry that she's actually been in a car accident. Because this information is recent in your mind, it's vivid, it's emotionally charged, and it's easily accessible in your mind. So you are more likely to think that your daughter's been in an accident if you watch this film the day before than perhaps you would otherwise. Now, this happens kind of on a subconscious, unconscious basis. We're not actually aware that this is what we're doing, but this is what we're doing. You are aware of it now. This bias leads to inaccurate evaluations of a situation. It's obvious when you think about it. Being aware of it then, instead of relying on the first thing that comes into your mind, you can start to break that apart a little bit and then ask yourself, can I look at this in a more objective way instead? So that's the availability heuristic bias. And then we have the confirmation bias. Now, you might be thinking, gosh, Christine, we have lots of biases, don't we? Well, I'm only mentioning 2 or 3. I hate to tell you this, but we have lots of them. We have lots of biases that lead us often to making inaccurate evaluations. But as I say, as you know, self-awareness is the first step to positive change. And if you're aware of this, you at least stand a chance of being able to correct it. So let's have a look at the confirmation bias. So this involves you giving more weight to information that supports your existing beliefs or expectations. In other words, if you've had a bad experience with something in the past, then you are likely to expect that the same thing is going to happen again, or the same outcome is going to occur. Let's imagine, let me use as an example. I know it's extreme, but it serves the purpose. Imagine you're a police officer who's been trained to look for physical signs of lying and who has been constantly lied to over the course of possibly each day in your work. You are more likely to believe that everything, maybe that everybody says to you, is a lie. Now, I know that sounds extreme. Or you might believe that everything that somebody says is a lie. Either way, it causes problems. But it's confirming. That's what confirmation bias is. And obviously, in a policeman's everyday life, that can cause them problems, that confirmation bias. And then we have the external influences. So if an issue, let's say an issue is constantly being talked about down in your local pub, amongst your friends and in your community, you might overestimate the importance of that issue because you're constantly hearing about it. You may not have been even worried about it before, but because your community or your friends are talking about it, you might give more weight to it and start to worry about it too. And then we've got the media. Well, you know my thoughts on the media. Turn it off. Or if you need to keep yourself abreast of the world events, watch it once a day if you must do that. The fact is, the media highlights negative events and problems. There's even a saying in their industry, if it bleeds, it leads. In other words, the most horrific, horrible thing that happens, put that up in front because people are going to want to watch it and be drawn to it. But they don't just do it once, do they? It's repeated over and over and over again. So much so that you could be forgiven that we're all going to hell in a handcart and we're going tomorrow. That's how it can make you feel. This constant exposure to negative events, it creates a skewed perception of the prevalence of something and the significance of these events in the real world. That's what constantly watching the news can do for you. And then, of course, there's just plain old uncertainty that as human beings we're not comfortable with. We want to know this is going to happen, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. And let's face it, if that happened in real life, it would become very boring very quickly, wouldn't it? But in terms of the unknown, and not being certain about something, it creates a fear, which leads us to imagining worst case scenarios. We've talked many times about worst case scenarios. So then, just with that little information there, you can tell that if you are already massively overestimating the outcome of a future threat, you're giving it much more power than it actually has. And that being the case, then, you are measuring your ability to cope with it against a massively false scenario. You've blown this thing up to be this big, and you're thinking, I'm only this big. How can I possibly cope with this big? When in fact, this big is only this big, and you can cope with it easily. Why do we underestimate our ability to cope then? Well, it happens largely because we often ignore our past experiences. We forget the times when we faced difficulties and overcame them. So I'm here to remind you, ladies, if you are a woman over 50, and in general my audience tends to be women over 50, then you have faced difficulties in your life. But you've overcome them to get to this point in your life. You overcame those difficulties. This is something you must not forget. We tend to downplay our role in the outcome of those difficulties. You need to write down these things, difficulties that you overcame and how you did it. Now, also, when you're worried about the threat of a future event, it puts you into fight or flight mode. First of all, it might just be gentle, but the bigger this event gets and the bigger the threat feels, the more you go into fight or flight mode, which is when, as we've talked about before, your focus becomes narrow and it focuses totally on the problem and not on the solution, which is what, of course, is what we need to do. So that's the first thing you need to do. You need to do all the things we've talked about before. First of all, you need to change your environment, move away from where you are at the moment, go for a walk. A walk is a great thing to do to clear your head, we know this. Go back to breathing, long, deep, focused breathing. Use the meditation that we did a few weeks ago, I'll leave the link down below, to clear your mind, or distract yourself in some way for a while to get you out of fight or flight mode, and then challenge your thinking, challenge your viewpoint. Are you stinking thinking? If you don't know what that is, it includes things like exaggerating, overestimating, and catastrophizing. Again, I'll leave a link to a video down below where we talk about the worst case, best case scenario exercise that would help you with this. So I'll leave links to the relevant videos down below. And then remember those difficult times of the past and think about how you handled those. So did you talk to a friend about it? Did they help you? Did you read a self-help book? Did you talk to someone else? Gather your resources. You have your own personal strength and resiliences. Support from friends and family is important. Support from others who are less involved with you is perhaps more important because they can be more objective about your situation. We know that talking to someone in that way can help you to put things into perspective. But just being aware of and recognising these biases and tendencies will help you to make more balanced assessments of this thing you're worried about in the future, and help you to make better decisions and take appropriate action ahead of time if needed, thereby reducing your stress and worry about it. So that thing that you're worried about, it will not be as bad as you think it's going to be, and you will be able to handle it. Watch the videos down below, they will help, and I'll see you next time. Until then, remember that on the Happy Stuff and Fluff, we're getting happy, living longer, and growing younger. About the nativity bias, you know about the nativity. You know about the you know about the negativity bias.